Hello everyone and welcome to a new episode of All Things IDA. In today's episode I'm going to be doing a historical overview of various versions of IDA. This is inspired by a blog post from May 2021 by Geoffrey, where he outlines the history of IDA in text form. It's really an intriguing story, so what I'm gonna do is I try to collect the available versions I could get my hands on, and I'm gonna run them and discuss a bit the progression, show you how the UI looks like. This will bring some nostalgia, and also I feel that it will be appreciated in the future to have a video record of these progressions of IDA. With that, let's get started. Okay, so here we have that blog post. I'm gonna leave a link in the description, and this was from 2021, which marks 30 years of IDA progression. And here the story starts 1990s. DOS was the most popular operating system and so on. So the whole idea about IDA was born in fall of 1990, and in the beginning of 1991 in January the first line of code was written. So look how old it goes. And then all of this was not implemented, then stopped working in IDA and so on. And enter DataRescue. This was the first company that adopted IDA, started distributing it and selling it in Europe. So here Pierre shares his story that IDA was originally just $30. So he went in the middle of the night to drop the wire order in the mailbox to get IDA. And he received version 2.05, which unfortunately I don't have. And then they started distributing version 3.05, which was similar to 2.05. And that's when Ilfaq then joined DataRescue and moved to Belgium. And by 2008, the first commercial decompiler was released. So it all starts in 1990. So let's start looking at the timeline. Late 1990, development starts, and then IDA 0.1 released May 21st, 1991. And luckily we have a download link, and I'm gonna show you how that version of IDA looked like. So let's switch to that and demonstrate the first version of IDA. So here, this is version 0.1. Let me drop to the command prompt and let's run it. So I'm running Windows 7 x86, which can run 16-bit programs. So here, if I say IDAG.EXE, that's how it looks like. We say interactive disassembler May 20, 1991, no database was found. This most likely was handwritten UI altogether. So let's run it with what it expects. IDA.EXE -c, and this is create a new database. The -c still remains to this day, where it will recreate the database. So now here, what IDA immediately created is a bunch of IDA files. So IDB did not exist yet. So create a new base. Base as well used to be called the database. Today we still have the same terminology. And here it is, and this is the IDA UI, the first IDA UI. It wasn't even TurboVision UI or really a full-blown text interface. And here we can see 16-bit COM program disassembly. We have the code, we have interrupt calls, and let me show you something funny. So we don't have menus, but we can start by pressing F1 to see the help screen. And we have all the commands here. We have macros, we have show segments, so jump to segments, calculator, before IDC basically, the help screen, entering a comment, so what we know today as semicolon and colon, control home and control end still to this date work the same, G, go to address, problems, same hotkey. These changed. These are not the same hotkeys anymore. F9, Shift F9 is not the same, and so on. And here we have stuff as well that are still to this date. For example, make code is F3 instead of C. Make a string is A. Array is star. And cross references from the beginning. P to make a function still exists. E to set the function end to this date as well, operand representations, and so on. So I'm gonna navigate a bit and show you. So for example, here we have a string. I'm gonna press A, and it asks me, I detected length of 9, yes. What do you want to call it? So it would not name it automatically like IDA today. So let's just press A, enter, and look, now we created a string, same story like today. And we can make code, for example, make data. So let me make some data, show you. So let's say here, I'm gonna repurpose this area here to make data. So we press D, it's the DB, DW, DD, and DQ. Even back then we had the DQ, so since 1990. Let's make a function here. So here is just a label. I'm gonna press P, and now we have a function. So here we can see procedure, and let's end the function here. Let's say after the interrupt call, just for testing. So I'm gonna press E, and here it put an end P to end the function. And let's try to make code here. Making code is F3. So indeed, we made code. Same story, IDA automatically analyzes. We can clearly see that even to date, since the first version of IDA, we have the same concepts. The cross-reference concept, the rendering concept, terminologies, same visual elements, and so on, everything carried over. And finally, we can just exit, and these are the files that were created for this session. So that was IDA 0.1. Then 1991, May 22nd, Windows 3.0 was released, followed in September 17, Linux. 1993, IDA 1.8 was released. Now it's using TurboVision. This is text UI created by Borland. And then IDA 2.0 with IDC language added. Then it started to be shareware being distributed and so on. Added support for new executable format. This is for the Windows 3.0. Added more processors as well. The first paper, at least here it's mentioned, reverse compilation technique by Cristina Cifuentes as well. And this would serve for inspiration for the decompiler in IDA. 1995 in August, Windows 95 was released, and IDA 3.6 was released in 96 with the signatures. So Flirt, what we use today. Also 32-bit console application instead of being 16-bit console application. And here DataRescue started distributing IDA in Europe, and CSO started distributing IDA in the US. IDA 3.84 in 1999, and now it has SDK and plugins. So I have a bunch of versions, 3.x. Let's take a break and show you those versions. So this is IDA 3.x, I don't know which one exactly, but that's a freeware version I could get my hands on. Let's run it. So I'm gonna run IDA with this input file, and this is gonna be the TurboVision interface. And this is very similar to IDA text UI we see today. So these are the landmarks of TurboVision. We have the menu provided by TurboVision UI library. We have the same elements in IDA. We have windows. We can do the stuff we can do today in the TurboVision interface. And we noticed that it's lacking a lot of functionality. For example, the view menu doesn't have too much really. We can open a structures window, cross references, selectors, segment registers, not as much as today, for example. Don't have like compiler option. We didn't have type information yet. Structure menu, segments, text, operand types. So we have fairly most of the operand types we have today. Same hotkeys, renaming, code, ASCII, etc. So here, same story. You can, for example, undefine, press C to make code again, colon, adding a comment, and so on. So this is 3.x, but still, as I said, 16-bit application. So file, abort, don't save. After version 3.x, we jump to version 4.0, where we have the graphical user interface. It's text mode listing only. That means we didn't have graph view, but at version 4.0 is the first graphical interface with the first appearance of that classical IDA icon. Then 4.10, type system was introduced, parameter identification and tracking. So we follow the arguments and comment next to them. 4.17 started IDA shipping with WinGraph, so we will see the external tool being invoked to render things. That's before the built-in graph viewer. Apparently here, Ilfaq started experimenting with the microcode internally, so we're talking 2001, and this is as well similar to what we see today. These microcodes are familiar, but here the microcodes are visualized. Remember 2001 and up to 2008 where the first commercial version of the decompiler showed up. 2002, Boomerang decompiler starts to be developed, so this is another decompiler. IDA 4.5, now it has an integrated debugger, so I'm gonna show you as well how it looked like and so on. 4.6, now we have IDA 64, so we used to have just IDA, and now we have IDA and IDA 64, where we can support 64-bit addresses. 4.7 added support for fragmented functions or chunked functions, so we will see that in the menu as function tails. And also the Linux console, so the TurboVision has been ported to Linux, and now we have IDA text UI for Linux as well. and also remote debuggers were introduced, so that's very nice. Around that time as well, 2004, IDAPython 0.5 was released, and 4.8 IDA added 64-bit remote debugger support. 2005, Hex-Rays was registered. So we had DataRescue and Hex-Rays. Now, speaking of that, let me show you some pictures I collected from the internet. So this used to be the DataRescue headquarters, here somewhere at this floor up here. That's where the development of IDA and so on in Belgium here. There's another picture I found as well. This is from the inside. Then we haven't gotten there yet, but in 2008 here Hex-Rays took over the development of IDA, and this here used to be the office of IDA, here the secretary, and here the development team up here. And that's when I joined actually. We were working here, Elfak and myself. Another picture I could find here, this is the entry to the small office, really small office. And then of course Hex-Rays moved from that small office to this building here, and well, it's no longer the case right now. Now they moved somewhere else, and they are now located at the address found on the website as well, and this is where Hex-Rays currently sits. So let's go back to the history and show you a bit how the version 4 looked. So I don't have version 4.0. I have 4.1 freeware. Since it's freeware, they didn't give us the graphical interface. So this is gonna be the text UI, but with all the features we spoke about and mentioned. So we'll have more things here, some functionalities, edit. Let's see the functions menu. So here we don't have the chunk functions yet, or function tails and so on. It functions, structures. Let's see the signatures, if we have it yet. Yep, it's first occurrence as well. We have the signatures in this version. So let's exit. Then 4.3 freeware, luckily we got the UI for that. So let's see it. Here, this is a freeware version, more than 50 processor modules, lots of file formats and so on. And look at the UI. So that's the first graphical interface version of IDA I can find, but that was not the first one that was released. And it was written in Borland C Builder using the Visual Component Library, and it did not support docking or anything. It was really pain to manage windows. It's not intuitive, I would say. So, but we can start to see stuff from today, for example, like the subviews, but it was really limited. So notepads, problems, function calls, type libraries, and the stuff we're familiar with. Most of the hotkeys remain the same. File menu, we didn't have much. We didn't have like the snippet window, so we'd have to just open a file or simply IDC. We didn't have the selection to select Python and so on. Edit menu, and we don't have debuggers yet in this version 4.3. Not yet. And we don't have graph view as well. So let's see. Here we have the graph, which is the external graph, which will run WinGraph32. So yeah. And as I said, window management was really primitive. So here, let's say cascade windows, or yeah, let's just tile horizontally, for example. But you could save the window setting. At least we didn't have profiles, so you just save it and that's it. The toolbars remain the same, and this is the 4.3 with graphical interface. 4.6, now it has debuggers, because 4.5 introduced the debuggers. So 4.6, IDA itself was asPack. So for a period of time, DataRescue was packing IDA, and if I remember correctly, they were contemplating to protect IDA against piracy and so on. Of course, asPack is nothing related to piracy, but it was packed. asPack is easy to remove, but they still have watermarking on the binaries since then. So let's run IDA. This is the 4.6 version with the debugger. The windows were still not dockable, so as well managing the windows was not necessarily easy, but let me give you a taste of the debugger. So we still have the same remnants of the UI for the debugger. So let me go to debugger, process options. Here let's debug IDA itself and hit F9, start debugging. Look at this, it's not necessarily the best. So yeah, it's really hard to work with this one, I'll be honest with you. And yeah, this is the register views that we're used to, the threads window, the registers, how it was. It's still the same, but much better. In a sense, they are dockable, properly organized, more context menus, and more register classes. I don't think we supported more than like FPU, segment, and general registers. Today we have more register classes. Let's see the modules window compared to what we have today. Okay, so this is on top, it's in the way. Let's just get rid of it. Here, let's see, right click, not much. We don't have like analyze module, jump to base, and all these kind of things. And the debugger was pretty much buggy. And this was one reason I got heavily involved with IDA, reporting lots of bugs. So this is 4.6. Let's see 4.7. 4.7 introduced remote debugging. So here we should be able to see the remote debugging. That's the first version of the remote debugger server as well. Then let's jump to versions 5. Version 5 is where the built-in graph view was introduced. 5.1, more debuggers, and the beta version of the decompiler plus the SDK in 2007. So let's take a look at version 5.x. So that's the first version with the built-in graph viewer, pressing space to toggle between the two, and the graph overview, which was not dockable. Alright, so that's version 5.0. So we saw 5.0 with the built-in graph viewer, 5.1, 5.3, 5.4, we had a bunch of new stuff. We have 3 new debuggers. We had Bochs debugger, GDB, Igor did that. I did the WinDbg and the Bochs debuggers. So this is version 5.4, and let's see here if we switch debuggers. Now we have, in addition to the local Windows debugger or the remote Windows debugger, we have the WinDbg, the first version of the WinDbg debugger, and Bochs debugger as well, the GDB stub, and so on. After 5.4, which introduced 3 debuggers, and also IDAPython started to be shipping with IDA. 5.5, one of the biggest things was the dockable windows. That's a feature I worked on, and it wasn't fun for me. I don't like UI programming, but let me show you the quality of experience, how it improved with dockable windows. So this is 5.5, and look at this. Now we have nicely dockable windows. So for example, now I can drag this and float it, or I can drag it and put it here, for example. Now this IDA is still using the Borland C Builder. So it's not Qt yet, and what we used back then, I remember we licensed the docking library for Borland C Builder 6, and that's what I used for the docking interface. Alright. So after version 5.5, since Hex-Rays now ships IDAPython with IDA, we made sure it works on Linux and Mac. I was the person maintaining IDAPython back then. Appcall feature as well was introduced. I made a bunch of videos about that. And then 5.7, scripted plugins and processor modules, and file loaders. We don't see it here, but also file loaders. So I also implemented that feature where we will be able to write plugins, loaders, processor module, and scripts. IDC would not support to this date processor modules written in IDC, only file loaders and plugins. Then the ARM decompiler. Then for IDA 6.0, where now we have cross-platform Qt-based graphical user interface for all the major platforms. And so around 2009, Daniel Pistelli, the author of Explorer Suite or CFF Explorer back then, he's pretty famous, Anticore, now also runs Cerbero Labs and Cerbero Suite. Very nice tool. I'm hoping to make a video review about his product in the future. He joined Hex-Rays. He ported all the Borland C++ builder / VCL codes, re-implemented everything within 9 to 10 months. Rewrote everything in Qt, and that's what we have to this date in modern IDA. So let's take a look. I don't have 6.0. I lost so many versions of IDA, so I don't have all of them, but 6.0, as we said, is the first Qt version. Of course, first version must be buggy and so on, so we don't want to inconvenience people, so we kept shipping the IDAG, which is the Borland C++ builder version, and IDAQ for Qt. So if there's a bug or something in the Qt version, you can always revert back to the time-tested GUI version. So we're gonna try to put them side by side here. This is the old Borland C++ builder version, and this is the Qt version, well, which is really much snappier. I would say it's very fast. So here, let's try to open something here, and here this used to be the older version. from Borland, and this is from the Qt interface. It aims to have the same look and feel, of course, and everything. Here we didn't have that window dockable in the pre 6.0 version, but here now the graph overview as well is dockable and so on. Now, a little difference as well back in 5.x, for example, if we undock, we can easily grab the title and dock it back again. That's it. To this date here, if we undock something, we have to go through that title bar here, then we get to see this one, and then once we see it, we can dock it back in. But yes, this is the first version of the Qt interface and so on. So after the 6.0, bunch of improvements, 6.3 introduced source level debugging. This was the last period here. I worked at Hex-Rays as well. I was during the development of this feature. 6.4, 6.6, more improvements, 6.7, official Python bindings for the decompiler. Before that, a user with the nickname Einstein had unofficial bindings. I spoke about that in previous videos as well. 6.9, ARM64 decompiler and Android debugger 6.95. While these look very little points, in reality, this is no simple thing. So we're talking a lot of changes. So if we want to look at what's new, hopefully we can see how much new things. So every version has so many changes. It's not just like one bullet point or two bullet points. So let's pick 6.5 for example. So tons of bug fixes and little improvements, additional hotkeys and so on. This is how it is. Really so much work. Let's continue. Now this is where IDA did a major refactoring. In version 7.0 we stopped shipping 32-bit binaries, so now all the binaries are 64 bits. So while IDAQ.EXE and IDA64.EXE give the impression that one is 32 and the other is 64, the binaries themselves, the IDA executable binaries, were all now 64 bits. That's it. And that's where also major refactor and SDK, so many things changed and so on. Plugin compatibility as well was broken, and you had to rebuild stuff and change API names in your sources. So that's a milestone with respect to refactoring, and it broke previous compatibility. So decompiler microcode API. So now in the decompiler SDK you can access the microcodes. 7.2 introduced Lumina, and around this period 2019 Ghidra was released, and Ghidra had an undo feature. Shortly after, Hex-Rays introduced the undo feature in 7.3. Before, so even 7.0, let's take even 6. Go to the edit menu, no undo. So we don't have any undo feature. Go to IDA 6, no undo. But now if we run the modern IDA version, we have undo. So we don't think about it these days, but we have undo when it's applicable, of course. Now I started with an empty database, but now we have undo and redo. So that was in version 7.3. 7.4, and now IDA supports only Python 3. 7.5, folder views. So that's where we can right click in choosers, most choosers. Now you can organize items in folders. 7.6 and so on. So I started the channel a year ago, and I think the first videos I was doing were probably using IDA 8.2. So if you keep watching my channel, you will see IDA latest versions as the new versions get released. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. The purpose of this video was just for historical purposes. I hope you didn't mind me jumping here and there all over the place. We started by following the blog post by Jeffrey, and we started with IDA version 0.1 and discussed different versions, and I showed you the videos as well, some changes, the UI functionalities and so on, and shared some personal stories along the way. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.